The blue light from Thomas Harrison's laptop screen cast strange shadows across his small apartment as he mindlessly scrolled through various auction sites. It was 2 a.m., and sleep evaded him as usual. His job as a cybersecurity analyst had him working odd hours, and his mind was still buzzing from his latest project. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, vintage computers, maybe, or rare programming books. What he found instead changed his life forever. The listing appeared between a collection of old Star Trek memorabilia and someone's grandmother's china set, sentient being, classified origin, serious inquiries only. The starting bid was set at an absurdly low amount, $50. Thomas snorted, assuming it was either an elaborate prank or someone selling a prop from a sci-fi movie. The product description was cryptic: Specimen A, 7249. Humanoid. Female. Age equivalent, early 20s, birth years. Condition, excellent. No returns. No questions. Buyer assumes all risks and responsibilities. There was a single image, grainy and dark, showing what appeared to be a cylindrical container with a frosted glass panel. "This has to be fake," Thomas muttered, taking another sip of his now cold coffee. But something about the listing nagged at him. The website itself was strange, he couldn't quite place how he'd gotten to it, and the URL was a string of characters that seemed to shift every time he looked at it. As a cybersecurity expert, he should have been more cautious, but curiosity got the better of him. He placed a bid of $75, more out of amusement than anything else. To his surprise, the site accepted his payment information without issue. As he was about to close his laptop and finally try to sleep, a notification popped up: bid accepted. No other bidders. Sale confirmed. Thomas sat up straighter, suddenly more alert. A second notification appeared with shipping details and a warning: preparation for arrival required. Specific environmental conditions must be maintained. Further instructions will follow. He tried to back out of the purchase, but the website had vanished. His browser history showed no record of the site, yet his bank account displayed a pending charge for $75. Thomas spent the next hour trying to trace the transaction, but every lead went nowhere. It was as if the website had never existed. 3 days later, a nondescript delivery truck pulled up outside his apartment building at dawn. 2 men in gray coveralls efficiently unloaded a container roughly the size of a refrigerator. They asked for his signature on a tablet that looked like no device he'd ever seen, then departed without a word. The container hummed faintly as Thomas examined it in his living room. It was made of a material he couldn't identify, not quite metal, not quite plastic, with a surface that seemed to shift colors when viewed from different angles. A control panel on one side displayed symbols he didn't recognize, pulsing with a soft, phosphorescent light. "This is insane," he whispered to himself, running his hands over the smooth surface. "What have I gotten myself into?" The answer came moments later when the container's front panel suddenly became transparent. Thomas stumbled backward, his heart nearly stopping in his chest. Inside, suspended in a clear liquid, was a woman, or at least, something that looked mostly like a woman. Her skin had a subtle silvery sheen, and delicate, iridescent markings traced patterns across her face and bare shoulders. Her hair floated around her head like dark smoke in water, occasionally shifting color like oil on water. Most striking were her eyes, closed now, but occasionally fluttering, with visible movement beneath the lids. As Thomas stood there, frozen in shock, her eyes snapped open. They were entirely black except for pinpricks of white light that seemed to dance like stars. She focused on him immediately, and a voice echoed in his head, not sound, but pure thought. "You are not who I expected." Thomas fell back onto his couch, his legs giving out beneath him. I didn't expect you to be real," he managed to say out loud. The being in the container tilted her head slightly, the movement causing ripples in the liquid around her. "Yet you bought me anyway." "Interesting." Her mental voice carried an accent he couldn't place, not foreign, exactly, but otherworldly, as if the concepts behind the words came from somewhere far beyond Earth. This was supposed to be a joke, Thomas said weakly. I mean, who sells aliens on the internet? Those who wish to hide things in plain sight, she replied. I am called Zara. And you, Thomas Harrison, have just become involved in something far larger than a simple online purchase. Before Thomas could ask how she knew his name, the container's liquid began to drain. As Zara emerged, graceful despite her confinement, alarms began blaring from the control panel. Red symbols flashed urgently, and the room's temperature dropped several degrees. We have approximately 17 of your Earth minutes, Zara said, steadying herself against the container's edge. That's how long before they realized the transfer was successful and begin tracking this location. She fixed those star-filled eyes on him. Your next decisions will determine whether we both survive the night. Thomas stared at her, his mind racing. He had just wanted to look at auction listings before bed. Instead, he'd somehow bought himself an alien fugitive and, apparently, all the trouble that came with her. As if reading his thoughts, Zara's mental voice softened slightly. I am sorry to involve you in this, she said. But now that you have, perhaps we can help each other. That is, if you're willing to trust a being you purchased for less than the price of your last takeout order. Despite everything, Thomas found himself laughing at the absurdity of it all. Do I have a choice? There are always choices, Zara replied, her expression becoming serious. But rarely are there easy ones. The next 17 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Thomas found himself throwing essential items into a backpack while Zara systematically dismantled her transport container, her movements precise and deliberate. Her fingers moved with impossible speed across the control panel, entering sequences of symbols that made the entire unit pulse with energy. They'll trace the container first, she explained, her mental voice clear despite her concentration. We need to corrupt its tracking system without destroying the evidence we might need later. She paused, glancing at him as he stuffed his laptop into his bag. You're handling this remarkably well. Thomas zipped up his backpack, trying to ignore how his hands were shaking. I process panic differently than most people. Years of cybersecurity crisis management, you learn to freak out later. He watched as she extracted what looked like a crystalline data core from the container. So, want to tell me who they are? Zara carefully wrapped the crystal in his spare t-shirt before placing it in her own small bag that had emerged from a hidden compartment. The simple answer. People who would kill us both to keep their operation secret. The complicated answer. She straightened up, her star-filled eyes meeting his. How much do you know about your government's extraterrestrial containment protocols? You mean like Area 51? That's real. A sound like wind chimes filled his head, her laughter. That's a tourist attraction. The real operations are hidden in plain sight, just like that auction site you found. There's an entire shadow economy trading in extraterrestrial refugees, technology, and information. Some of it sanctioned by your governments, some of it, not. Thomas checked his phone, 11 minutes left. And you're what? A refugee? I chose to be sold, Zara said quietly. It was the only way to make contact with someone outside the system. I didn't expect. She gestured at him, her iridescent markings pulsing slightly. You were supposed to be a buyer for one of the major operations. Instead, I got lucky. You're an accident, which means you might be exactly what I needed. Before Thomas could respond, his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number, leave now. Seconds later, all the lights in his apartment went out. They're here early, Zara said, her markings now glowing brightly enough to illuminate the room. Do you have a way out that isn't the main entrance? Thomas nodded, already moving toward the fire escape. Follow me. And maybe you can explain why you're glowing. Autonomic response to threat. My species evolved as both predator and prey. She followed him silently to the window. The markings can also do this. Suddenly, she seemed to fade from view, her outline becoming blurry and indistinct. Partial camouflage. Not perfect, but useful. They climbed down the fire escape as quietly as possible. Thomas could hear heavy footsteps above them. Someone was in his apartment. As they reached the alley below, a beam of light swept across the building's facade. Zara pressed him against the wall, her partially camouflaged form helping to conceal them both as several dark vehicles pulled up to the building's entrance. "Those aren't government agents," she whispered in his mind. "The consortium found us first. We need to move. Now." They ran through back alleys, Zara leading the way with an uncanny sense of direction. Thomas's mind raced with questions, but survival took priority. After about 20 minutes of evasive maneuvering, they ended up at an all-night diner on the outskirts of town. "They won't look for us here," Zara said, her camouflage fading as they slid into a booth. "Too public, too ordinary." She picked up a menu with curious interest, her markings now just a subtle shimmer on her skin. In the fluorescent lighting, she could almost pass for human, if you didn't look too closely at her eyes. "Okay," Thomas said, keeping his voice low. "I think it's time for some real answers. What's the consortium? Why are you really here? And most importantly, why me?" Zara set down the menu, her expression grave. "The consortium is an interplanetary trafficking organization. They deal in everything from technology to biological specimens. They have infiltrated multiple Earth governments, including yours." She traced a pattern on the table's surface. Was part of a resistance movement on my world. We discovered that the consortium was selling our people, our technology, to the highest bidders across multiple systems. When we tried to expose them, they launched a coup. Those of us who survived scattered. And you decided getting yourself sold was a good plan? I needed to understand their operation from the inside. The auction sites are their newest venture, hiding their trafficking in plain sight among millions of ordinary human transactions. But I was supposed to be bought by one of their shell companies. Instead. She looked at him thoughtfully. You found me by accident. Which means you might have found a flaw in their system. A way in that they don't know about. Thomas ran his hands through his hair, trying to process everything. So what now? I can't go home. My job, my life. Now, Zara said, her mental voice gentle but firm, you help me expose them. Your skills, my knowledge, together we might have a chance. Or you can walk away. I won't stop you. But know that they've seen your face now. The simple life you knew ended the moment you placed that bid. A tired-looking waitress approached their table. Coffee? Thomas looked at Zara, who gave him the slightest nod. 2 coffees, he said. And I guess we'll need a plan. We already have one, Zara replied after the waitress left. But you're not going to like it. She pulled out the crystal she'd taken from the container. This contains locations of every consortium holding facility on Earth. The problem is, we need access to a quantum decoder to read it. And I only know of one place to find that technology. Let me guess, somewhere incredibly dangerous. Those star-filled eyes seemed to sparkle with something like amusement. How do you feel about breaking into a secret government facility? Thomas sighed as the waitress returned with their coffee. Any chance we could start with something smaller? Maybe a bank vault or Fort Knox. Trust me, Zara said, lifting her coffee cup with elegant curiosity, those would be much harder. She took a sip and immediately made a face. This is terrible. How do humans drink this? Despite everything, the danger, the absurdity, the complete derailment of his life, Thomas found himself laughing. Here he was, planning a heist with an alien fugitive in a dingy diner at 3 a.m. And somehow, it felt right. First lesson about being on the run on Earth, he said, pushing his cream and sugar toward her. Bad coffee is just the beginning. 3 days of planning, 2 stolen key cards, and 1 borrowed maintenance uniform later, Thomas found himself wondering how his life had become a sci-fi heist movie. He adjusted his fake janitor's badge as he pushed his cleaning cart through the bland government building corridors. The facility's official designation was Department of Agricultural Research, but as Zara had explained, that was just a cover for something far more interesting. Third door on the left, Zara's mental voice guided him. She was hidden in plain sight, her camouflage ability allowing her to pose as a shadow on the wall near the security cameras. Remember, you have exactly 4 minutes before the security system resets. Thomas swiped the stolen key card, his heart pounding as the door clicked open. The Agricultural Research Lab looked more like NASA's control room, filled with equipment he'd never seen before. He wheeled the cleaning cart to the far corner, where a quantum decoder masqueraded as an ordinary server bank. Company, Zara warned suddenly. 2 guards approaching. Ahead of schedule. Thomas pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages while carefully inserting the crystal into a hidden port on the decoder. The screen flickered to life, displaying cascading symbols he couldn't understand. "Don't move," a stern voice commanded from behind him. "Hands where we can see them." Thomas slowly raised his hands, his mind racing. This wasn't part of the plan. He turned to face 2 armed guards, their weapons trained on him. "Sir, this is a restricted area," one guard said, reaching for his radio. Before he could call for backup, the light suddenly went out. In the darkness, Thomas heard swift movement and 2 soft thuds. When the emergency lights came on seconds later, both guards were unconscious on the floor, and Zara stood between them, her markings pulsing with combat-induced adrenaline. "That wasn't very subtle," Thomas remarked, turning back to the decoder. "Neither is this," she replied, just as alarms began blaring throughout the building. "How much longer?" "The download's at 89%, Thomas said, watching the progress bar. "But we've got bigger problems." He pointed to his tablet, which showed security camera feeds he'd hacked into. Multiple teams of armed personnel were converging on their location. "Those aren't regular security forces," Zara observed, her voice tense. "The consortium has infiltrated this facility deeper than I thought." She touched the unconscious guards, checking their pulses. "These men might have been the only legitimate personnel we'll encounter." The download completed with a soft chime. Thomas grabbed the crystal and turned to run, but Zara held up her hand. "Wait." She closed her eyes, her markings glowing brighter. "There's someone else here. Someone like me." Before Thomas could ask what she meant, the ventilation grate above them crashed to the floor. A figure dropped down, another alien, but different from Zara. This one had copper-colored skin and geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change like living circuitry. "Ren," Zara breathed, recognition in her voice. "You're alive." "Barely," the newcomer replied, his mental voice carrying a different resonance than Zara's. "When I detected your energy signature, I couldn't believe it." He looked at Thomas. "A human accomplice? Dangerous." "He's different," Zara said. "He found me by accident." "Nobody finds anything by accident anymore," Ren replied grimly. "But we don't have time to debate this. The consortium's elite hunters are here. They'll have the building surrounded in 2 minutes." Thomas checked his tablet again. "He's right. Every exit is covered." "Not every exit," Ren said. He pressed his hand against the wall, his geometric patterns glowing. A section of the wall seemed to ripple and fade, revealing a hidden corridor. The original builders of this facility weren't human. There's an entire network of hidden passages they never found. They could hear boots thundering down the hallway outside. Thomas grabbed his backpack while Zara retrieved a few small devices from the decoder. They followed Ren into the hidden corridor just as the lab door burst open behind them. The wall sealed seamlessly, muffling the sounds of pursuit. "The passages will lead us to an underground transport hub," Ren explained as they hurried through the otherworldly corridor. But we're not the only ones who know about them. The consortium has been using them to move merchandise across the country. How long have you been here? Zara asked. 8 months. After the coup, I tracked a consortium shipment to this facility. I've been gathering intelligence, trying to find a way to expose their operation. He glanced at Thomas. Your humans hack into their system just gave us the opening we needed. I have a name, Thomas said, slightly annoyed. And what do you mean, opening? Ren's patterns shifted to a deeper, more intense configuration. The consortium maintains power through secrecy and infiltration. But they have one weakness: their Earth operation has to maintain a facade of legitimacy. If we can prove they've compromised government facilities, we can force an official investigation, Zara finished. One they can't control. They emerged into a vast underground chamber filled with sleek transport pods. Thomas stared in amazement. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, all chrome and pulsing energy fields. This is how they move their acquisitions across continents, Ren explained. The network connects to similar facilities worldwide. But we're not here for transport. He led them to a central control station. We're here to shut it down. Thomas examined the control panel. The system's isolated from outside networks. Smart. But if we can access the main controls. Already on it, Zara said, connecting their stolen crystal to the station. The facility data we stole contains override codes. We can trigger an emergency shutdown of the entire network. Alarms suddenly blared through the chamber. On the upper level, doors burst open as armed figures in black tactical gear poured in. Consortium hunters, Ren said, his patterns shifting to combat mode. They're using human mercenaries now. Less conspicuous. How many? Thomas asked, fingers flying over the control panel. Too many, Zara replied, her camouflage ability activating. Keep working. We'll hold them off. Thomas watched in amazement as Zara and Ren moved into action. Their alien abilities made them nearly impossible to target, Zara seeming to fade in and out of visibility while Ren's geometric patterns created disorienting visual effects. But the hunters were well trained and well equipped. Energy weapons fired, filling the air with crackling bolts of plasma. Thomas ducked behind the control panel, trying to concentrate on the shutdown sequence while chaos erupted around him. 1 minute to full shutdown, he called out. But they're going to reach us before. A plasma bolt struck near his position, showering him with sparks. When he looked up, he saw Zara standing over him, her markings blazing with protective fury as she deflected another shot. Keep going, she ordered. We didn't come this far to fail now. Thomas nodded and returned to his work. As the shutdown sequence neared completion, he realized something had changed in him. A week ago, he was just a cybersecurity analyst living a normal life. Now he was in the middle of an alien conspiracy, fighting alongside beings from another world. And somehow, it felt like exactly where he was supposed to be. The console beeped, 30 seconds to shut down. Above them, more hunters were rappelling down from the upper levels. Ren was wounded but still fighting. Zara's camouflage was flickering, her energy clearly depleting. Thomas looked at the countdown, then at his newfound allies. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. And he wouldn't have it any other way. The shutdown sequence completed with a thunderous power surge that plunged the entire facility into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. The hunters' energy weapons sputtered and died as the facility's power grid collapsed. Secondary systems failing, Thomas announced, reading the rapidly scrolling data on his tablet. The entire network is going dark. Every consortium transport hub worldwide just went offline. Then we need to move, Ren said, clutching his wounded side. His geometric patterns were dimmer now, pulsing erratically. They'll have backup power and conventional weapons. But Zara wasn't moving toward the exit. Instead, she was staring at one of the transport pods, her star-filled eyes wide with recognition. "There's someone in there," she said softly. "Someone important." Before Thomas could stop her, she was running toward the pod. The emergency lighting revealed what the regular lights had hidden. This pod was different from the others. It was older, more ornate, with symbols etched into its surface that seemed to respond to Zara's presence. "No," Ren called out, his voice filled with sudden urgency. "Zara, don't." The pod's surface rippled and became transparent, revealing its occupant. An older alien woman lay within, her silver-white markings forming intricate patterns that mirrored Zara's own. Even in stasis, she radiated an aura of authority and wisdom. "Mother," Zara whispered, placing her hand against the pod's surface. Thomas looked between Zara and Ren, understanding dawning. "You're not just a resistance fighter, are you?" "She's the heir to the High Council," Ren said grimly. "And that's the first speaker, the leader of our world's government. The coup wasn't just a takeover. It was an assassination attempt." Gunfire erupted from above, forcing them to take cover behind the pods. The hunters had switched to conventional weapons, and more reinforcements were arriving. "We have to get her out," Zara said, working on the pod's controls. "It's a trap," Ren argued. "They knew you'd come if you found out she was here. They've been waiting." "Of course it's a trap," Zara replied, her fingers flying over the control panel. "But that doesn't change anything. I won't leave her." Thomas watched the upper levels through his tablet's camera feed. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before they surround us completely." He looked at Zara. "Whatever we're doing, we need to do it fast." The pod stasis field flickered and died. The first speaker's eyes opened, the same star-filled darkness as Zara's, but deeper, ancient. She spoke, her mental voice resonating with power that made Thomas's head spin. "My daughter," she said, reaching for Zara. "You shouldn't have come." "Touching family reunion," a new voice called out. A figure stepped into view on the platform above them, human in appearance, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the chaos. "But I'm afraid we'll have to cut it short." Ren's patterns flared with recognition and fury. "Dominic Reed. The consortium's Earth liaison. An architect of your world's new management structure," Reed said with a cold smile. "Though I prefer strategic reorganization to coup. Sounds more professional." He gestured, and more hunters emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice your little infiltration attempt, Princess? We've been tracking you since before you arranged your own sale." The auction site, Thomas realized. "You let her through on purpose." "Indeed. Though you were an unexpected variable, Mr. Harrison. Quite impressive, really, stumbling onto our network by accident. We'll have to study how you managed that." Reed's smile widened. "After we've properly contained the situation, of course." The first speaker stood, moving with liquid grace despite her long stasis. "You understand nothing of containment, human. Our people have kept the great darkness at bay for millennia while your species was learning to make fire." Reed's expression hardened. "Your people's time as guardians is over. The consortium has found a better way. The technology and resources you've hoarded, imagine what humanity could achieve with them." "I've seen what the consortium achieves," Zara said, her markings blazing. "Trafficking, exploitation, destruction. You're not advancing humanity. You're selling out every species in the galaxy for profit." "Progress requires sacrifice," Reed replied. "Now, shall we do this the easy way, or—" He never finished the sentence. The first speaker raised her hand, and a wave of energy pulsed outward. The hunter's weapons crumbled to dust. Reed staggered, his human appearance flickering to reveal something else beneath, something ancient and twisted. "You're not human," Thomas gasped. Very few at the top of the consortium are, the first speaker said. They are the very darkness we were meant to guard against. And now, daughter, you understand why I let myself be captured. She turned to Zara. I needed you to see the truth. To understand what we're really fighting. As enlightening as this is, Reed snarled, his voice distorting, you've already lost. The consortium's influence on Earth goes deeper than you can imagine. Even if you escape today, where will you run? Who said anything about running? Thomas stepped forward, holding up his tablet. While you were monologuing, I've been broadcasting everything. Your real appearance, this facility, all of it. Streaming live to every major news outlet and government agency in the world. Reed's inhuman features contorted with rage. You're bluffing. The facility's communications are down. Thomas smiled. You should really update your cybersecurity. I used your own transport network protocols to piggyback the signal before we shut it down. Right now, the whole world is watching. And I don't think they're going to believe this is agricultural research. The chamber shook as distant explosions echoed through the facility. Real government forces would be arriving soon. Reed looked at his hunters, then back at their small group.